She didn't fall at once. She just stood there, looking at me, that slow smile on her face, her eyes wide open. I carried her down to the boat. It must have been almost midnight. There was no moon. The wind was squally from the west. I carried her down to the cabin and left her there. I managed to get the boat out into the bay beyond the beacon. The wind blew down from the headland like a funnel. I opened the seacock's, water began to come in. I had a spike with me, and I drove it into the bottom boards. One plank split right across. I took out the spike and drove it into another plank. Water came up over my feet. I left Rebecca lying there. I closed the cabin door. I climbed into the dinghy, pulled away, and watched. The boat was sinking by the head. The jib was shaking and cracking like a whip. Suddenly, she heeled right over, and the mast split right down the center. The boat wasn't there anymore. I came back to the house. As I was undressing, Mrs. Danvers knocked at the door. I think she was worried about Rebecca. I told her to go back to bed. That's all.
They can't prove anything against you.
Not yet.
No one knows but us.
They may find out.
How?
By asking questions.
What questions? Who's going to ask questions?
The coroner, for a start. There's bound to be an inquest.
And on the 23rd of that month, you went to Edgecombe to examine the body of a woman, which you were able to identify without hesitation as being that of your late wife, Rebecca de Winter. How do you explain that?
I must have been mistaken. The body was already far gone in decomposition. It could have been almost anyone, man or woman. I suppose I went there expecting it to be my wife's body. I was mistaken.
Yes. Yes, that seems to be quite understandable. Thank you, Mr. de Winter.
Was this de Winter?
Mr. Tad, it is suggested that at the moment Mrs. de Winter went below, for a foot perhaps, a violent gust of wind came down from the headland into the cove. Now, would that, in your expert opinion, have been sufficient to capsize the boat?
No, sir, I don't think it would.
Well, I'm afraid that is what must have happened. I don't think Mr. de Winter or any of us suggests that your workmanship was to blame for the accident at all. You fitted the boat out at the start of the season. You reported her sound and seaworthy. That's all I want to know.
Excuse me, sir, but there's more to it than that. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to make a further statement.
Oh, very well, go on.
It's like this, sir. After the accident, some people said that I'd let Mrs. de Winter start the season in a leaky, rotten boat. I lost 2 or 3 orders because of it. So when they found the boat and brought it to the surface, I asked Captain Searle if I could examine her. I wanted to satisfy myself that I'd done a good job of work.
And were you satisfied?
Indeed, I was, sir. There was nothing wrong with that boat as regards the work I did to her. She'd sunk on sandy bottom, sir. I asked the diver about that, and he told me so. She'd not touched the ridge at all. She was lying on sand, and there wasn't the mark of a rock on her.
Is that all you want to say?
No, sir, it's not. What I want to know is this. Who drove the O's in her planking? Rocks didn't do it. The nearest rock was 5 feet away. Besides, they weren't the sort of marks made by a rock. They was O's, done with a spike.
Why, What do you mean? Where were these holes?
There was 3 of them altogether, sir. One right forward by a chain locker on the starboard side below the waterline. The other 2 close together amidships, underneath her floorboards in the bottom. And the sea cocks had been turned on as well.
I don't understand that. Wouldn't it be very dangerous to leave the sea cocks open?
Why, yes, sir, it would. With those O's in her planking and the sea cocks not closed, it wouldn't take long for a small boat like her to sink. Not much more than 10 minutes.
What are you suggesting, Mr. Tabb?
It's my opinion, sir, that the boat never capsized at all. I think she was deliberately scuttled.
Now, Mr. De Winter, do you know anything of these holes driven in the planking?
Nothing whatsoever.
I must remind you, you're still under oath. Do you doubt Mr. Tabb's statement?
Not at all. He's a boat builder. He knows what he's talking about.
So you would agree with Mr. Tabb that a boat with such holes driven in the planking and the sea cocks open could not float for more than 10 or 15 minutes?
Oh, yes.
That the boat was maliciously tampered with before Mrs. De Winter went for her evening sail. Had that been the case, the boat would have sunk at her moorings.
No doubt.
Therefore, we must assume that whoever did take the boat out that night must have driven those holes in the planking and opened the sea cocks.
Yes, I suppose so.
And yet we've already heard that the door of the cabin was shut, the portholes were closed, and your wife's body was lying on the floor of the cabin.
Yes.
Now, added to this is the extraordinary information that holes had been driven in the planking and the sea cocks were open. Now, does not that strike you, Mr. De Winter, as being very strange?
It does, certainly.
You have no suggestions to make?
No, none at all.
Well, Mr. De Winter, painful as it may be, I'm afraid it is my duty to ask you a very personal question.
Yes?
Were relations between you and the late Mrs. De Winter perfectly happy?
Would someone take my wife outside? She's going to faint.
I'll take you to the car.
No, I'd rather stay, Frank. I want to wait for Massey.
He might be rather a long time.
Why should he be? What are they going to do?
That man Tabb has altered everything. We'll have to approach it from a different angle.
What angle? What do you mean?
I heard what he said. They won't believe in an accident anymore.
That's ridiculous. How can he tell what happened? What are they trying to prove?
Oh, I don't know.
That man was there, that man that came to see Mrs. Danvers.
Jack Flavel, yes, I saw him.
Well, they were sitting there together.
Yes, I know.
Why was he there, Frank? What right had he to go to the inquest?
He was her cousin.
Well, I don't trust them. They might do something. They might make mischief.
Try not to worry. Come along. I'm sure everything will be all right.
Do please try to answer the question without unnecessary comment, Mr. De Winter. I'm not conducting this inquiry for my own amusement.
That's rather obvious.
So let me ask you again. Had you and your late wife quarreled?
I can't remember.
Well, did you ever quarrel?
Well, of course we... from time to time.
And on this particular evening?
I have already told you. My wife had gone to London. I dined with Mr. Crawley. We had no opportunity to quarrel.